I don't know about you, but I get reflective around the new year. I like to look back at the year and ask myself, what's changed for me in the last 365 days? What were my successes? What were my failures? What new potential has entered my life? And I do that for my games as well. In fact, last week I posted this video that is basically a reflection on the epic champions that were most valuable to me in 2024, on my main free-to-play account. And it was really interesting. It seems like you enjoyed the video. I think probably because we don't have these kinds of discussions too often. And so if you're a free-to-play player, you know that you need to get value out of non-meta champions. And so I think I was able to show you where I got value out of some non-meta champions who were still valuable maybe in the late or end game. And that gave you some insight into how to build your account, or maybe how to find new solutions out of champions that you already owned. And I would like to do that again, but instead of epics, this time we are going to be talking about legendaries. I have a lot more legendaries that are built on my account than epics, so it's going to take a little bit longer, but we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go faction by faction and pick one MVP legendary from each faction for my account in 2024. And hopefully that'll give you some insight into how to solve some challenges in Raid without the perfect roster. I hope that's interesting to you. I am Colred. This is Colred Plays Raid Shadow Legends. Let's get started. I just want to quickly wish you and yours a very happy new year. I hope 2024 ended for you on a high note, and that 2025 starts off even better. We have had an eventful year here at Colred Plays, and for Sun and myself, I would just like to say thank you for all of the support this year and for being part of our journey. We absolutely intend to keep it going in 2025. So once again, Happy New Year, and let's get back to your video. Here we are in my roster, and as you can see, I have 77 6-star legendaries. Now, I know for the epic video, I also showed you 5-star epics, but I think for legendaries, we're just going to stick to 6-star legendaries, because that shows that I've at least invested a little bit into these champions. They don't have to be level 60, but 6 stars. Now, there are only 77 of these, so hopefully this video will be a little bit faster than the epic one. Now, I'm just going to break this down by faction, so let's go ahead and start with the Bannerlord faction. As you can see, I have 4 level 60s here, but Chronicler is not built. Adolin, I don't really think she's a very good champion, despite the 5-star soul that I have on her. I'm sure I will build her at some point for Cintranos, but for right now, I haven't had much value. Let me know in the comments below if you found value for this champion. I think she's a bad champion, but that doesn't mean she can't have value somewhere. Now, Rathalos is probably the best champion out of this quartet, but I haven't had a lot of need for him. I've used him in a couple of places. I have a bit of an odd build on him right now. It's just something I threw him into when I first got him. I've used him on other accounts to good effect, but when he got onto this account, there was no real need for him anywhere, not even in faction crypts. So he gets spot usage every once in a while, but far from an MVP. Now, Cythalia actually does a lot of work for me in Cintranos, and that's basically it. I would say Cintranos and Faction Wars, she doesn't even feature in Doom Tower very much, but when I need her, she does an excellent job. She is built very well, so that helps, but in addition, she has that full team buff strip, and then she's also got that single target cleanse and heal, just a pretty nice AoE heal, and then she's got the HP burn on the A1. So I have used her to good effect in Cintranos, and I would say she's been very valuable to me this year, although not an exciting champion to pull, and primarily just used in Cintranos. However, honestly, even though he's unbooked, Timit is the one that I think has gotten more usage as the year has progressed. He was not built fully until recently, but I've put him in a stun set, and you can see his A2 is an AoE and his A3 is an AoE, so having 2 AoEs in a stun set can be really valuable. Again, mostly a Cintranos champion, and even though he's grown the most this year, I still think Cythalia probably, now that I think about it, is getting more usage and being more effective. So I don't want to sleep on Timit. He might get better if I booked him this year. I know he would get better if I booked him this year, but I don't have his duo Kaya. If I get her, I will definitely fully book him out and invest more in him. But for right now, I do think Cythalia just has it's an old school kit. It's been power crept, but it's still such an effective kit that you can use it in a lot of places in Centranos. It's good against bosses. It can be good against waves. Yeah, it's a lot of utility here in the kit. And so I think Sathalia is my MVP for the Bannerlords. Now, the Elves, I have a lot more legendaries. This is probably going to be the largest number of legendaries I have built. I have 8 of them to level 60. I don't use all of them. I would like to use Islan more. I really like this champion. I think he's phenomenal. Shirmani was probably my first ever legendary MVP. In fact, I think she was the first or second legendary I pulled on my account. And this AoE freeze is still fantastic. I do use her in Centranos frequently, sometimes in Doom Tower as well. I have recently really started to invest more into Deliana. I haven't booked her yet, but I will probably book her this year. I actually am finding her more impressive as time goes on. Other than that, I don't use these other champions very much. I do think that Tatura is worth investing in, and you can see I do have him booked, so it is my intention to use him more this year. I've had him for a long time, ever since he was a fusion, but I would say this is a pretty easy choice. I use Arbiter every day in Live Arena, 3v3 Arena, and Classic Arena, and then she still shows up in Faction Crypts. She shows up in Centranos. This is one of my most used champions in the game, probably, even though she doesn't get used as much in PvP as she did, say, last year. So she has fallen off for me this year, and still she's head and shoulders above everybody else in this faction form. Okay, taking a look at the Sacred Order, this is probably another runaway. I have recently pulled Venus, who I am going to invest in, and because I'm investing in her, you can see she's fully booked already. She's not built, but I do have all of her scrolls for masteries. That means that Cupidus is finally also going to get built and booked. He is built, and he has been built for a while, but he has not been booked, and he does have his full mastery. So he's close. So I think that duo is going to provide me with a lot of value this year. Obviously, the big, like, major champion in this faction this year has been Vaultkeeper Wixwell. He is now the key component to my clan boss team. I also use Corvus the Corruptor on that clan boss team. He was one of my favorite pulls from this year. But I don't actually use these two champions in a lot of other places. A couple of spot usages in Centranos and Faction Crypts. I don't even think in Doom Tower I use either one. As far as Bivold I use a lot in Hydra, and I also have started to use him in Centranos and a lot of other places. He's got a great kit that's actually really versatile. It's kind of surprisingly versatile. So he's got this provoke on his A1. He's got an A2 AoE provoke as well. But it also puts a leech out. It gives him a strengthen. He's got this second AoE that deals like extra damage. It's not really hard hitting. It gives him a shield. So he's got 2 AoEs plus this extra provoke. And then his passive reduces the damage that allies take from anybody under provoke. So in wave content, he provides a lot of tankiness for your team. And he's even got a little heal on this A3. So I've found a lot of value for Bivold of the Thorn this year, and I would say he's risen the most in my estimation. But honestly, it's still a runaway. I've got a 6-star blessing on my Cardiel. I use him all over the place. He was my first Void legendary. He's still probably my most important legendary on my account. I use him more than Arbiter. Yeah, I don't know how this could not be my MVP. But a lot of good champions here this year that I've pulled that I'm excited about and excited about using in 2025. Taking a look at the Barbarians. Oh, so I actually have more Barbarians, which makes sense when you think about it, because we had the Asgard Divide event this year. And so we got Loki and we got Thor, and I happened to pull Odin and completed the Freya event to get Freya. So those are 4 new champions right there. And then in addition, we had Armand's at the beginning of the year as a fusion. And then, let's see, I don't know if it was this year. I think this was the year I built Yakarl, although I think I got him last year. And then I recently pulled Tihanarok. And then, of course, I actually got my Nergigante Archer. So almost all of these champions joined this year. If you looked at my Barbarians last year, I think it was Syl of the Drakes and Valkyrie, and that might have been it. Maybe Yakarl was 50. But so I pulled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've got 7 Barbarians this year, and they're all really good for the most part. I don't use Loki very much, but Armand's I use a ton. He is a key to teams in live arena and regular arena, 3v3 arena especially. I use him there the most. Thor is absolutely great. I use him in dungeons, anytime I get a chance to use Thor, I try to use Thor. Freya's been really fantastic recently. I'm starting to use her in a whole bunch of places. I've just built Tuhanarok, literally just built her yesterday, I think, and her build is okay, but I'm using her specifically in a couple of places in Centranos. I used Yakal for a while in hard mode Fire Knight, but he has dropped off. I've replaced him, so he's not really being used there, but I just used him in Centranos today, and he absolutely crushes. But I have to say, the MVP, it's not Odin. It's not Odin. Odin is awesome, and I'm really happy that I have him, but it's the exclusive champion, unfortunately. I think even more than Armands and Odin this year, Nergigante Archer has just done crazy things. If you look at her build, first of all, 6,000 defense, 302 speed. She's got 415 accuracy, almost 90,000 HP. She's a machine. She's in Relentless. She's over 300 speed in Relentless. And she can solo a lot of the game, but then you can also put her in like every boss fight ever. She has a crazy kit. And I won't talk too much about her because she was an exclusive champion. And, you know, people can't get her anymore. So that's not as insightful. But I will say out of the rest of the champions, perhaps the most valuable, I think it would have to be between Odin and Armands. And it's a close call. I've been using Odin more in Live Arena now, and I've been using Armands a lot in 3v3 and some other places. Probably Odin. Because I'm just still experimenting with him, and I'm learning where he's good. And I'm finding he's good in more and more places. So those are my MVPs for the Barbarian faction this year. Looking at the Ogryn faction, I only have 2 champions. I did go for Ugir the Worm Eater. I've built him. I try to find a good use for him. I haven't been able to. Blizzar is a champion I don't use that often, but he is in my Fire Knight Hard 10 team. And he really makes that team go because he's got the triple hitter with the freezes. He's got the AoE freeze. He's just a great addition to that team. He doesn't hit particularly hard because I haven't built him for damage. He is relatively fast and accurate, so that's pretty good. But yeah, I would say he's got to be the MVP in this faction. There are only 2 to choose from. He's the only one I use. So that's that. Lizardmen faction. I recently pulled Sulfurion, and he's already starting to add value to my account. I'm still finding uses for Raz and Scarhide, but the 2 most valuable for the duration of the year have been Necmo Thar and Pythion. Now, Necmo went right into my Hydra rotation, and he's on my Brutal or Nightmare Hydra team. Like, he's on my top Hydra team. But I'm struggling to get my composition just right. I have found a lot of places to use him, though. I really like the fact that he has the speed aura in all battles, plus he's got an decreased speed AoE and an increased speed AoE, plus the turn meter fill. So he's one of the best engines for your team in the entire game. He's absolutely phenomenal for that. Plus with the extra turn mechanic. I mean, it's like, it's a little bit different than Seeker because Seeker's on a 2-turn, but this actually ends up on a 3-turn. So it's like a little bit like Deacon, but better because you have the increased speed. It's not even a fair comparison to Deacon, I don't think. I don't know who to compare. I guess Astrid is maybe the closest with the decreased speed and the increased speed and the turn meter fill. But he's just such an engine for your team. You get such good value out of him. So he's the one that I've used more and more this year. Pythion is a steady presence in my roster. That AoE cleanse, the heals, the AoE revive, the damage reduction. He goes in all sorts of teams, including Amius. He goes up against a lot of bosses. If I'm struggling with a boss and I need a support, Pythion is often the first one I reach for. But I think Necmo, I've used him more this year. Like, I haven't used Pythion more this year, but Necmo keeps going up. Maybe by the end of 2025, he'll be the MVP. But I think still here for 2024, because I got Necmo about halfway. I got him built about halfway through the year. I think probably the MVP is Pythion. It's a close thing, though, and I do think Necmo might pass Pythion as the year progresses. But the problem is, of course, Sulfurion might pass them both. I don't even have him booked yet. I haven't even picked a blessing yet. Right? Like, he needs to be booked during the next PR CVC, and then I'm going to start to see what this champion can really do. So he might be the MVP next year. But I think for this year, I'm still going to go Pythion. Now, Skinwalkers are interesting because I didn't really get anybody new this year, right? We had Wukong, who came on board last year, and then I had these two, Uko and Nishak, from their fusions, which were like 2 years ago. I got Ragash maybe 2 years ago, and I got Razzlevarg. I think I got him at the end of last year or maybe early this year, and it took me a while to invest in him, and I have found him nice, but not overly impressive. I can't quite get him into a team comp that really does good work for my account. Like, he shows up in Hydra, he shows up in a couple of places, he definitely shows up in Centranos from time to time. But I don't think there's anything that he can do for my account that I can't get done in other ways. Whereas all of these other champions are extremely valuable to me. I use Mighty Uko in Hydra. I use I use him in Arena, Live Arena, Classic Arena, all over the place. Centranos, yes. Boss fights, Doom Tower, yes. Everywhere. This guy is everywhere. Nishak has come back into my roster this year. I'm using him more and more. He's one of the feature damage dealers in my Live Arena teams. So absolutely risen in stock this year. Primarily because bombs are just a great way to get around Stoneskin. So that's a big reason. Wukong came into the rotation. I use him in Arena. I use him in wave content sometimes. He's primarily, I would say he's probably primarily a PvP Lego at this point. I don't know that I use him PvE very much at all anymore. Maybe faction crypts and that's it. He shows up in Centranos when he needs to, but honestly, he doesn't show up that often. So I think he's probably fallen off more than this year, while Uko and Nishak have gone up. But Ragash is the champion who has come surging back into my roster this year. The 5-star soul has definitely helped. I did a rebuild on him, and as you can see, his stats are very good. Not super survivable, but 5,000 defense is a nice number, 45,000 HP, 255 attack, almost 250% crit damage, and 468 accuracy. I use him as a setup man for my other defensive-based nukers, so I use him in conjunction with Newt, I use him in conjunction with Harima, I use him in conjunction with Nair Gigante Archer, so other defensive-based champions that can really benefit from his 30% defense in all battles aura. That's really nice. Plus, he's got the 5-star Soul Reap, so when he hits hard. When he uses this AoE, he's got the decreased defense. He's got the stun. That stun's highly valuable. I'm using him all over the place. Centranos anytime I can. Doom Tower anytime I can. But in other fights as well. He's even the primary damage dealer in my Wixwell Clan Boss team this year. And he never featured in the Clan Boss before. So I think Ragash has become one of the most valuable damage dealers on my entire account. I think more valuable than Thor. There are only maybe 2 damage dealers that I would put above Ragash on my account. So I think he's got to be the MVP for me this year, to my surprise, but I do love the champion. He's phenomenal. All right, now looking at the Orcs faction, well, you can see I only have 2 built. I have recently gotten Varl, and I'm starting to build him. I believe he's supposed to be very good in Hydra, so there's a chance that I'll use him in Hydra in this upcoming year. But it really comes down to Iron Brago and Artak, and I don't think it's close. I don't use Iron Brago. I built him with the intention of putting him into a Clan Boss team that never really happened. So he basically shows up every once in a while in Centranos and faction crypts, and not even Doom Tower, really, I don't think. There might be one secret room that he shows up in. But Artak is still everywhere. I'm using Artak a little bit less than I did last year. At least at the end of this year, because I pulled Sulfurion, who has replaced him in a few places. I also changed his build in the middle of the year to try to make him a solo champion, and it didn't quite work out for me. He was originally in a stun set. And so as a result, his usage changed over the course of the year, but still a very good champion that I use frequently. So I'd say Artak is probably the most, not probably, he's definitely the most valuable Lego in the Orcs faction for me in 2024. All right, halfway through, we are moving on to Demonspawn. Demonspawn it hasn't changed this year. This is the exact same collection of legendaries I had at the end of 2023. And Helikath would have been my MVP at that point. He was, prior to Wixwell coming on, he was the focus of my Clan Boss team, so I had an unkillable with Helikath. He was very good. So he's actually been used less this year because I'm not using him in Clan Boss. he needs a rebuild. Now that he's not in Clan Boss, he needs a rebuild to just do his job better, because I don't have to speed tune him for a Clan Boss team anymore. So probably his value will increase in 2025 if I can get around to that rebuild. But out of all of the champions, I use all of them. I honestly do use all of them except for Tyrant. Tyrant doesn't get used at all. He was also supposed to go into a Clan Boss team at some point. I think I was primarily doing it for a video, but he's just kind of sitting there waiting to be used somehow. But I would say Wither gets used a lot and Sissia gets used a lot. And these are the two most valuable champions probably in this faction. I mean, Helicath. So those are the three. So I use Drex, but not that much. So I would probably say the third most valuable is Wither. She's got this AoE cleanse that is really nice. And I definitely use her in Centranos and in Doom Tower in a couple of places, but that's it. Helicath gets used more, and then Sissia gets used more than everybody. She's one of my best damage dealers, AoE, HP burns, and activations, plus a weaken and a conditional decreased defense on the same skill. So it's a very good skill. But again, she's fallen off a little bit this year at the end of the year after I pulled Sulfurion. She still gets used a lot, though. She's great in wave clear situations. I'm trying to think where else I use it. Oh, she's probably my main Hydra damage dealer. She's my highest tier Hydra damage dealer. So that's really a focus for her as well. Okay, so I would say, yeah, Sissy is the MVP, although Helicath will probably pass her this year. Undead Hordes are easy. It's Ultimate Death Knight. He's the only one that I really use. I want to use both Mashalet and Morgaine. I just 6-starred Morgaine not that long ago, but you can see neither one of them are booked. Ultimate Death Knight is built to go slow in Arena and two-turn Stone Skin. I want to rebuild him, though, to slow him down even more, because right now he's at 124 speed, and I want him down to like 100 speed. I'd love him at 97 speed. So he is primarily used in Arena and not anywhere else. I think I do use him in Faction Crypts, but just because I don't have a choice right now. Okay, so moving on to the Dark Elves. This is a faction where there's a lot of value. And I actually really like Ray. Ray is a great champion. She's kind of an old school damage dealer. She's got an AoE A1, an AoE A2, and an AoE A3. The A3 is a buff strip with a 70% chance of a freeze. So it's a great buff strip, and it's an okay AoE freeze. Her A2 inflicts more damage against targets under debuffs. So if you freeze them, you'll have a debuff. Or the A1 has a 50% chance of placing a decreased defense, so that will place a debuff. So there's some synergy in her kit, which is really nice. I've set her up with a stun set, and I use her in ally attack teams like Blender comps with Lady Mikage and Cardiel all the time. She's one of my main Doom Tower wave clears, so she just clears normal and hard mode for me pretty much all the way up. Even though you can see she doesn't hit super hard. I have her built with 100% crit rate, but only 147% crit damage. So it's basically about the control and the debuffs. And she does a good job for me there, but she deserves a rebuild because she's a very good champion. I'm using Lydia more now at the end of the year than I have ever before, because I finally got my Seer a 6-star blessing, and Lydia and Seer are such a good pairing. So I am using her a bit more than I used to. She is built very well. You can see over 300 speed. She's a good champion. She's a very, very good champion. I don't know that I use her to her full potential. There are probably places I could use her more. I do use her in Hydra, and I use her in a lot of dungeons, so I do use her a lot. And Vizix has fallen off for me this year. I still use her in Hydra and a few. I just used her today in like 3 places in Centranos. So she gets used a lot. Lydia gets used a lot. Mithrala gets used a lot. And they're all pretty close. I would say the champion that has gotten more usage this year than last year would be Lydia. And the champion's gotten less use this year is probably Vizix. And Mithrala's held about even. Of the 3 champions, the one that I'm most attached to, who I look to the most, has got to be Mithrala. She's got the 5-star blessing, and I think that's a big difference, especially like in Centranos, but also in hard mode dungeons and, Phantom Shogun and stuff like that. So yeah, I would probably say that Mithrala squeaks by Lydia here as the most valuable champion in this faction for 2024. A lot of champions here that I am sort of just building this year. I built Eric's this year. I built White Queen and Cora this year. I am currently building Narma. She's not there yet. And I've built Cavalix this year. He was at 50 for a really long time for me, and now I've taken him to 6 stars. I don't think he's booked yet, though. So I don't think Narma or Cavalix can really factor in. And as much as I think White Queen and Cora is a very good champion, I haven't quite unlocked her yet. I haven't figured out exactly how to use her the right way. I don't have the White King, so I don't have to worry about the duo. But I'm still kind of trying to figure her out because I have Podrick, who has the same A1, and I think he's a better overall champion. And he works better with my roster. So I think it has to come down to Walking Tomb Drang and Eric's. And I still use Walking Tomb Drang a lot. He's actually a really helpful champion in a lot of places, especially because of this A3, which equalizes the HP of all allies. And then the HP level of all allies will be brought up to the level of the ally with the highest HP. It's basically a 100% heal almost. Like, it's a huge heal from a damage dealer. He's got an HP burn and an activation, but I stopped using him in Sand Devil's Necropolis because I now pair Newt with my Godseeker Oniri, so I don't use him as much as I did, but he still gets a lot of use. I find a lot of places to use this champion. But Eric's is the one who I think I'm using more and more. I actually really like this champion. Doesn't get talked about all that much. Has a great kit, AoE, ally protection, and counterattack. Plus his passive that fills turn meter. I'm not quite there yet on the build, but I'm really excited about this champion. I do think over the course of the year, this champion has been the most valuable to my account in general, and I keep finding new places to use Eric's and get a lot of value. I believe she is an HP, let me just check, HP-based damage dealer. So you can build her really tanky, and you can see her. My stats on her are okay, 74,000 HP, a little bit low defense at 2,400, 209 speed. So I definitely need a rebuild here, but even in sort of a meh build, she does crazy good work for me in all sorts of places. I use her in Doom Tower, I use her in Centranos, I use her in Faction Crypts. I also throw her into dungeon teams sometimes, stage 20 teams. Like, there are all sorts of places where her kit works really well. And again, another good champion that you could put in like an ally attack team or a counter attack team because of that AoE A1 that actually hits pretty hard and has a chance of removing a random buff from each target. Pretty solid A1. So I would have to say the MVP this year is probably Eric's. All right, moving on, we have 3 factions left to go. We're up to the Dwarves. Really good champions in the Dwarven faction for me. I've got 5. Tormund the Cold is the one that I built this year and heavily invested in. Actually, Goffred I also built this year because I got the 6-star soul. So that was the first 6-star soul I ever pulled from a stone. So I decided that I may as well throw it on Goffred. And Goffred is great. Last year or the year before, I guess, Goffred at 50 helped me clear the Dwarf faction crypt. Like, I got him. I had Trunda. I pulled Goffred, built him to 50, put him in some gear, and he just walked the team up like the next 7 stages. It was crazy how good he is. He's got an AoE stun, which is awesome, 100% chance. He's got an increased defense, and then he removes decreased defense and weaken, which is okay. His passive, basically, if an ally is about to get killed by a fatal hit, he blocks the incoming damage and places a block damage on them for 1 turn. So they don't live at 1 health. They live at whatever health they were before they were going to get hit by the fatal hit. So if they had 3,000 health left and they were getting hit by 4,000 points worth of damage, they keep that 300 or 3,000 health, and then they get a block damage on top of it. And then he's also got a decreased defense and a provoke on his A1. Pretty solid. 6-star blessing. But, I mean, Newt, there's no real... I mean, Brogny's great. Trunda's great. These are all great champions. But Newt is so ridiculously broken. If you don't have Newt, you want Newt. If you have a Newt, you want a second Newt. If you have 2 Newts, you probably wouldn't mind a 3rd Newt. There aren't that many champions in the game where you think, I would build 3 copies of this champion. Even if, like, I were struggling for resources, I would probably build 3 copies of this champion. He's so incredibly strong. And he's pretty well built for my account. A little bit low on HP at just under 50k. 5,200 defense, 261 speed, 300% crit damage, 565 accuracy. I think a few people have commented on, like, why do you have so much crit damage on your Newt? Because max HP hitters have a cap. right? When you use his A3, it's an enemy max HP. If you hit the cap, you don't get any more damage. And you could hit the cap with like 220 crit damage or something. And that is true in a couple of places. If you have a weaken and a decreased defense, then you only need about 220 or 230% crit damage on your Newt in order to hit the cap. But if you don't have both of those buffs, you need a lot more crit damage to hit the cap. In addition, there are times when like you're not going to have either of them, you know? In addition, the A1 and the A2 hit harder with more crit damage. So I was thinking about like taking some of this gear off of Newt in order to lower his crit damage. And then, you know, like I have him in Sand Devil's Necropolis and he's not capping on the Sand Devil, right? Because he doesn't have any debuffs in the Sand Devil's Necropolis. So if I took him out of this build, he would actually not hit as hard to the Sand Devil and it would take longer. I have thought about building him in Merciless and not Impulse, but the other one, Reflex, in order to get his cooldowns to come back around so I could use his A3 like a lot more frequently. And I do actually have a build for him that I put together and it drops his crit damage down to about 230 or something like that. And the reason I didn't change it is because it also drops his speed down to like 220. And I like running him at 260. So that's why I'm running my Newt in this particular build. It does great for me. I don't really feel the need to take away any of his crit damage. But we'll see. I might rebuild him in 2025. But definitely the MVP of this faction. And I don't think that's likely to change unless I pull a Krizia, right? Like maybe a Krizia could compete with him. But otherwise, I think Newt is the MVP forever for the Dwarves. All right, Shadowkin. This is an interesting faction for me because I have 4 very good champions in this faction, right? Not Newt. Ninja has been integral to my account's progression because I pulled him originally back in 2021, I think it was, whenever he came out. And he was one of my first legendaries. He was like my 5th or 6th legendary on my account. Has factored in my clan boss team. He's a great boss killer. He's good at controlling waves. I still use this guy in a lot of places, but he has fallen off a little bit since I have started to develop other damage dealers like Newt and some others. So I'm not using him as frequently as I used to, but when I use him, he's still phenomenal. I've gotten him faster this year and actually improved his overall build a little bit. So I think he was like earlier in the year, he was running maybe 240% crit damage. I got a little more and he was running at like 202. So I got him a bunch more speed. I did lose a little accuracy for that, but I figured I'm not using him in a lot of hard mode dungeons, so I don't need a ton of accuracy. But yeah, so Ninja's still great for me. Lady Kimmy was awesome as a Doom Tower lead for a long time. She's got that crazy aura, 30% in speed in Doom Tower battles. But my roster has just gotten so good that I don't really need the speed anymore. Like the gear has gotten so much better. My champions have gotten so much faster this year that I actually don't need this crazy speed aura. And unfortunately, her buff strip is only 1 random buff from each enemy, and that's the weakness in her kit. Like, she has an AoE slow, an AoE decrease accuracy, she has an AoE block buffs, and an AoE turn meter fill and increase speed. All of those things are great, but she only removes 1 buff from each enemy, and then the block buffs is conditional. And that's the weakness. So I've actually started to use her a little bit less. She still gets used in a lot of places, especially in Cintranos, but a little bit less. Harima has started to climb a little bit. I finally got her in a decent build and I'm starting to use her a little bit more, but she's still not quite there. She's not quite there in terms of the build. You can see 245 crit damage, under 5k defense, you know, speed's 241. She's almost there. Maybe if I get a good relic for her, she'll like really step up. I do use her in Hydra, and I also use her occasionally in Arena, Live Arena. Anywhere I need a force affinity damage dealer, she definitely gets consideration. So I would say she's used a moderate amount, not as much as Ninja, but more than Lady Kimmy. Xu Zhen, however, has been the revelation this year. I only pulled her 2 months ago, maybe. And I built her right away, and I've been using her all the time, but she's primarily PvP. She doesn't get used in PvE very much. She's great in Live Arena. She's great in 3v3 Arena. So absolutely has added the most value to my account out of these 4 champions this year. But I don't think she can be the MVP because she doesn't factor in that many places, right? PvE places. She doesn't show up. So I would have to say, while she's probably my like PvP MVP, I think maybe Ninja is still the MVP in this faction for me, which is hard to argue against, right? He's just one of the best boss killers in the entire game still to this day. And because I've had him the longest, he's built the best and he factors in the most fights. So I think any one of these 4 could be an MVP on your account, depending on what you need. But for me, it's going to be Ninja for this year. All right, final faction here, Sylvan Watchers. We've got 8 of these built. I have built 3 of them just recently. I built Feral, Glaikad, and Oella, 2 6-stars, all recently. And I think they're all fantastic champions, but they can't be my MVP for this year. So if we're talking value, as much as I love Emic, his value is primarily in Iron Twins for me. He creates an unkillable Iron Twins team for me, which is value, but it's just basically one location. I don't really use him in other places. Centranos a little bit, yes. Not really in Doom Tower, not in dungeons. I tried using him in dungeons earlier in the year, and I would combo him with Renegade for like a cooldown reduction team. Try to pair that with Seer. He pairs decently well with Seer, actually, which is not bad. But I have since pulled him out of all of those teams in the last half of the year because they just weren't that efficient. And as my damage dealers have gotten stronger and stronger, I don't need Emic and the reset that much. So I think he's a great champion, and he can be valuable in a whole lot of places if you need him to be, but I just need him less than I used to. Allele needs a buff. He's a good champion, but he's not good enough. So the big 3 this year for me have been Astrid, Grand Oak Podrick, and Elva. I got Podrick earlier in the year, but I didn't build him for a little while. Since I've built him, I am finding more and more places to use him. I'm now using him in Hydra. I'm using him in Doom Tower. I'm using him in Centranos. I'm using him in some dungeons. So he's definitely getting a lot of use. Elva needs a rebuild for me. She's okay. She's like fast, but she's a little too squishy for some reason. I don't know why. She's got 4,800 defense and 56,000 HP, but she dies easily when I use her in a lot of places. I do get some value out of her. She's actually in an Amius team, I think, for me. So I like Elva quite a bit, and I try to use her as often as possible. But I would say she's impressed me less than Podrick this year. So I think I would value him as slightly higher than her, at least in terms of the usage that I'm getting out of both champions. But Astrid is the champion that's like just been everywhere. For the first 6 months I had her, she featured in like all of my arena teams. She's fallen out of my live arena rotation for the most part. She's kind of a backup now. She's like my 8th or 9th champion, depending on, what happens. But I use her in a lot of PvE. She's great in wave. She's got that AoE decrease speed and weaken plus the turn meter decrease. This skill is a crazy good PvE ability. And then in addition, she also has that increase speed and increase attack. So she has her anywhere Arbiter was still getting used in PvE, she's replaced Arbiter because she's better than Arbiter, right? For those things. The only thing you're losing is a little bit of turn meter fill, right? But with the extra turn and all of that, just the value. And then her A1 is sneaky good. It has a 75% chance of placing a sleep debuff for 1 turn on an enemy. I get so much value out of this A1. Plus, she's a healer, and if you pair her with another turn meter increaser, you get a lot of heals. So you can actually pair her with like Podrick, right? Because he's got that turn meter fill on his A3. And so you get her turn meter fills heal you, then his turn meter fills heal you. You get 2 increased speeds. They kind of go back and forth. She's got the extra turn, and you get a lot of heals out of Astrid in addition to the debuffs that are so valuable. And as you can see, she's running very fast for me. She's running 336 speed, 408 accuracy. Definitely survivable at 3,200 defense and 71,000 HP. Oddly enough, survives better than Elva for some reason. I don't know why. I still don't understand it. Elva was dying so much, I actually built her tankier and she still dies too much. I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me, but she does. And maybe it's affinity or maybe it's just where I'm using her. I don't know. But I would say it's a close call for this faction, but I'm going to take Astrid over Grand Oak Podrick this year. So she is my MVP in this faction. But I think next year it might be Podrick or potentially Feral or Glykad could sneak in there as well, because these are two excellent champions who are on the rise for me on my account. Okay, so I think that's it. That is all of the factions, all of my MVPs. A couple of surprises to me. I didn't like really research this before. I just looked at them right now. So I was just making my mind up as I went. But let me know, what do you think? Did I make a bad call? Did I make a good call? Or are you just surprised at certain calls? Again, our accounts are going to be different. Our rosters are going to be different. But I probably snubbed the champion you love, and I may have picked an MVP that you're a bit surprised at. So let me know that in the comments below. Okay, that is it for me today, and this is our last video of 2024. So once again, Happy New Year, Happy 2025, and I'll see you on the other side. I've been Colred. Thanks for hanging out. I'll see you in another video soon.